52 أتى 70 في الموسم هذا ثبت. And then at the age of 52 years old, 70 people came to pledge allegiance to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and this was the second pledge of Aqaba. And this was how Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was developing a community ready to accept him in Medina. And then the author continues, من طيبة فبايعوا ثم حجر مكة يوم اثنين من شهر صفر. And as mentioned, the 70 came and they pledged allegiance to him. And then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when Allah commanded him, he did hijrah. He migrated from Mecca. He left migrate from Mecca to Medina in the month of Safar, according to this author. Other scholars, other writers of Sirah say that it happened in the month of Rabi'ul Awwal. However, what can be confirmed that again, it happened on a Monday. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was waiting, so he commanded all of his companions, those that could, to migrate before him, and he was waiting specific commandments from Allah until the commandment came and Allah selected his travel buddy, so to speak, who he will be traveling with, and selected Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And from here we can see Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's affinity to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That if Allah has selected him as his companion now, as the seerah continues, we can see many examples as to where Prophet Muhammad identifies him indirectly as a leader amongst the companions, whether it be taking a group for Hajj, during his illness, leading the people in Salah, and which amalgamates and which results in him ultimately becoming the next leader of the believers, Amirul Mu'mineen, the Khalifa, the first Khalifa of the believers. But we can see from this point the virtue that Abu Bakr had. Then the author continues, فَجَاءَ طَيْبَةَ الرِّضَى يَقِينًا إِذْ كَمَّلَ الثَّلَاثَ وَالْخَمْسِينَ. And so he entered into Medina at the age of 53 years. And he resided there for 10 years. He spent 10 years in Medina. Okay, so في يوم الاثنين ودام فيها 10 سنين كملا نحكيها. And so, as mentioned, he entered on a Monday and he remained in Medina for 10 years, and this is what the narrations mention. And then the author continues, أكمل في الأولى صلاة الحضر من بعد ما جمع فاسمع خبري. Sorry. أكمل في الأولى صلاة الحضر من بعد ما جمع فاسمع خبري. This is where a distinction was made between the salah of the traveler and the salah of the resident. Remember, as mentioned previously, the salah that the believers would pray would be 2, 2, 2, 3, 2. Fajr was 2, Dhuhr was 2, Asr was 2, Maghrib was 3, and Isha was 2. Here Allah issued the commandment that the salah of the traveler will be as such, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, and the salah of the resident has been increased. The salah of the resident has been increased to Fajr being 2, Dhuhr 4, Asr 4, Maghrib 3, and Isha 4, as we know. من بعد ما جمع فاسمع خبري. Okay, yeah. Right, so this is talking about after he led Jum'ah in Quba. And this is the first masjid that he built in the outskirts of Medina, Masjid Quba. The first masjid that he built, and he led Jum'ah here. ثم بنى المسجد في قباء, as mentioned, ومسجد المدينة الغراء. ثم بنى المسجد في قباء ومسجد المدينة الغراء. And so the first masjid that he built was the masjid in Quba, and then after that was, as we know, when he entered into Medina, he built the masjid in Medina. ثم بنى من حوله مساكنه ثم أتى من بعد في هذه السنة. So he built houses around this masjid. أقل من نصف الذين صفروا إلى بلاد الحبش حين هجروا. Those that had migrated to Habasha, less than half of them now had migrated and they had come to Medina now. Remember we said the first migration that occurred amongst the believers was from Mecca to Ethiopia, modern Ethiopia, Habasha. Now, less than half had now come because they had realized that the Muslims had established their own community in Medina. They came there and they decided to migrate here. وفيه أخا أشرف الأخيار بين المهاجرين والأنصار. And so, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he's come, and if we try to think about it ourselves, the believers are in a very difficult situation. They've left their property, their houses, their lives in Mecca, and they've come now to a new city. Yeah? The Muhajirun, those that have migrated, and at the same time, those in Medina, they're now having to welcome a whole flock of new people into their lives. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he established this ukhuwah, this brotherhood between them, where they were allowed to inherit from each other. Their wealth was each other's wealth, and they really built this strong brotherhood, because this brotherhood was needed, and that they realized that tribal associations is not important. Here what is important is our belief in Allah and our commitment to this da'wah, to this deen, and to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was developing this amazing community here in Medina. And Quraysh knew this. The people of Quraysh knew this, and they realized this, and we'll come to see what happens. ثم بنى بابنة خير صحبه وشرع الآذان فاقتدي به. Okay, so we mentioned previously that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had married Aisha radiallahu anha before migration to Medina. She moved in, he prepared a house for her, the house in which he is buried today. We all go to visit. This is Aisha radiallahu anha's house. She is, subhanAllah, our mother is such a hospitable lady, because she allows people from all over the dunya to come and visit her husband. Which wife would allow that to happen? Which wife would allow people from all over the world to come and visit their husband? This is our mother. How do we know that how hospitable she was? Because in her own house, she would raise orphans. She didn't have any children herself, but she would raise orphans in her own house. Some of these orphans would become her most prominent students. Amra bint Abdul Rahman, if I remember correctly, was one of the 4 of her main students. And who was she? She was an orphan that Aisha radiallahu anha would raise in her house. This is our mother. So every time we go to do ziyarah, when we visit Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, inshallah, when Allah gives us all, those of us have, and inshallah Allah give us all many opportunities to go and visit Medina, perform Umrah. Always keep in mind that we are entering into Aisha radiallahu anha's house, and that it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing that our mother is so hospitable that she's allowed this, and Allah has allowed for us to enter into her abode and realize that from this house is where nubuwwah, from this house is where ilm of this deen, tawheed, emanated from. Like a magnet, Makkah and Medina like magnets that from these 2 cities, this deen emanated from, and we are pulled towards them as well. And so this was when Aisha radiallahu anha, she was taken from her parents' house, and into the house of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was her house, this was her abode, where Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is buried now. So now, let me just quickly mention, I may have mentioned it last week, Aisha radiallahu anha's marriage now has become something that's quite, for those of you that were absent last week, has been quite controversial due to the age gap, as we know. But what people fail to realize is that this wasn't the first proposal that came to Aisha radiallahu anha. The proposal of Prophet Muhammad and Allah, commanding, giving Prophet Muhammad the dream that he's to marry Aisha. Prior to this, she had another proposal from a man called Jubair ibn Mut'im ibn Adi. That is enough evidence to show to us that people getting married at such a young age was something normal. If it wasn't normal, there would have been no other marriage proposals, right? So this demonstrates that the marriage of Aisha was not something that was taboo It wasn't something that was strange in their society. It's definitely strange now. It's definitely something that is not implemented now because our society has changed. But it was something during their time. And so then, now what the author does is, and inshallah here we can speed up a little bit, the author discusses a lot of expeditions and battles. Now the difference between expedition and a battle is expeditions, and this is something we need to understand. Again, another claim that's leveled towards Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is that he was a warlord. They say that he was a warmonger, and they say, look how many battles he engaged in. Look how many, how many raids, and how he raided many caravans, how he looted many caravans, and he exiled some of the Jewish tribes and put some of them to the sword, etc. What we need to understand is this is again based on presentism. As I mentioned last week, presentism, where we are viewing pre-modern era. We're looking at history through a modern lens. This is incorrect. This is not how you view history. You view history through its own context. Now, what was the context of tribal warfare and tribal coexistence? It was a default status of war. Our default status is peace, because we have business deals, we have NATO, we have all of these alliances amongst countries. So that means our default status is a status of peace, whilst during the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the default status between tribes and regions was that of war. And war was default unless you entered into a peace treaty. Now it's different, right? You have a peace treaty with a country, with a region, with an alliance, and if you break that, once that's broken, then you're at war. This wasn't the case at that time. So what we will notice is the author mentions, and I'm just going to quickly skim through, I'm just going to kind of go through some of them fairly quickly, because a number of raids happened. The raids was common. Raiding was something that every tribe knew could happen when they would go on business ventures. That another tribe would come and loot their caravan, loot their camels. And this wasn't just, it wasn't out of warfare, it was like a sport to kind of demonstrate who has strength, who has strategy, who can kind of intercept another caravan. It was something that was very, very common. It wasn't something that only came along with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So the author kind of goes on to explain this. So he says, وغزوة الأبواء بعد في صفر هذا وفي الثانية الغزو اشتهر. So after, so he mentions the ghazwa of Abwa, a battle in Abwa which occurred after Safar, and this was and so then the second famous battle that occurred was at a place called Buwat, and then after this came Badr. Now he's just listing a number of different expeditions and battles. We need to make a distinction between an expedition and a battle. An expedition is a raid, where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would dispatch a small fleet of people to intercept a caravan or catch the enemy unawares. A battle is where two armies would meet at a specific point and engage with each other. They're both expecting each other. And here, when it says Badr here, so a list speaks about Abwa, Buwat, and Badr. This was the first Badr, the initial Badr which triggered the major Badr which we know, Badr Kubra, okay? So إلى بوات ثم بدر ووجب تحول القبلة في نصف رجب. And so now the author is speaking about the changing of the Qibla midway through the month of Rajab. As we know, the Ummah used to face Baytul Maqdis. And even till this day, I believe the Jews, they pray towards Baytul Maqdis. And so the Ummah previously this Sharia of the Jews was part of our Sharia. That our Qibla was Jerusalem. Until this year, where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was commanded to turn the Qibla to Al-Kaaba, to Mecca. When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he was in Mecca, he would face Jerusalem from the corner of Hajar Aswad. When you face the corner of Hajar Aswad, that is in the direction of Jerusalem. So he would face Jerusalem, but whilst facing the Kaaba at the same time. Because Jerusalem is northwest of Mecca. However, when you went to Medina, which is more north than of Mecca, and then the Qibla was changed to Mecca, then it will completely turned from northwest to south, because Mecca is more south of Medina. The reason this happened is because Allah knew that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had an affinity, he had a love for Mecca. And so he realized that there was a love, and he wanted to kind of turn, and he always wanted to be facing Mecca, so Allah turned the Qibla for the Ummah towards Mecca. And this gave a lot of peace and happiness to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so then the author carries on. من بعد ذي العشير يا إخواني وفرض شهر الصوم في شعباني. And then speaks about another expedition of Dhil Ushayr, and also in this month, in this year, 2 years after the Hijrah, came the commandments of Ramadan, came the establishment of fasting in the month of Ramadan, in the month of Sha'ban. And so then the author carries on, وَالْغَزْوَةُ الْكُبْرَى الَّتِي بِبَدْرِ فِي الصَّوْمِ فِي سَابِعِ عَشْرِ الشَّهْرِ. And then talking about the Battle of Badr, الْغَزْوَةُ الْكُبْرَى, that being Badr, in the month of Ramadan, on the 17th day of Ramadan. So on the 17th day of Ramadan, 2 years after the Hijrah, occurred the Battle of Badr, and there's a context behind Battle of Badr. There was a caravan, and remember, the Quraysh knew that the Muslims are a potential enemy. And the Muslims knew that Quraysh are a potential enemy, because they've had exchanges already. At Buwat, at Badr previously, Dhul Ushayr, there's been exchanges. So now, both are strategizing how to intercept the other. So information reaches Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that a caravan is heading towards Syria, a very lucrative caravan with merchandise which is going to bring a lot of wealth to the Quraysh. Why is this a problem? This wealth comes in, Quraysh can arm themselves to attack the believers. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wanted to intercept this caravan. Information reached Abu Sufyan from the Quraysh that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ intends to intercept this caravan, and so they take a different route. They take a different route, and the caravan is safe. When Abu Sufyan returns, and the Quraysh realize that the Muslims are out to get them, they said, right, let's send an army forward. So they send an army, 1,000 strong, and the Muslims that have marched out already, anticipating a caravan, realize that an army is approaching. 313. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is leading them. They are going to meet them. Just imagine. They weren't expecting to face an army. Yet, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he motivated them. He would motivate them and tell them that 2 things await us, either victory or martyrdom in the eyes of Allah. And so then they met. I'm just very summarizing the story very, very briefly. And so both armies met at Badr, and as we know the story, the Muslims were granted victory. This is a big lesson for us, that in our lives, when matters look beyond our grasp, when challenges seem too difficult for us, and we face daily challenges, right? Obviously, we're not facing battles, we're not fighting physical battles, but we're fighting battles in our own way, shape or form, with our family, with our health, with our work, whatever it may be. But having tawakkul in Allah like this 313, Allah's assistance will descend. And we know from the story of Badr, Allah's assistance descended in the form of angels. To the extent that many companions would see that when one of the enemy would approach them, before he could lift his sword up, the head of the enemy would be flying off. Even Jibreel alayhi salam came riding on a horse to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with a turban and with a fleet of angels. And many companions and people that were watching, other tribes, people that were watching, other travelers that were watching, they said that we saw like something, not man nor jinn, people in white with turbans floating between land and air on horses. Now I'm not saying that angels will come and descend and give assistance like that to us. We're not companions. But this is a big lesson for us, that once we have tawakkul and we take the means that Allah has given us, success will be ours. Allah will grant us success. Allah will grant us the ability to overcome the trials and hardships that we have. And this is why it's important that when we read the seerah, we ponder upon these points and we draw lessons. This is why Prophet Muhammad was known as, Allah refers to him as Uswatun Hasana, the best of examples. And why Allah, and subhanAllah, why the seerah itself has come to us in such a meticulous, detailed fashion. No other religion can claim the life of their leader or their prophet or whatever it may be to be detailed and documented in such a manner. So it's important that when we read about these incidents, specifically these incidents, we take lessons from it that we can apply in our own lives. And so then the author carries on, وَوَجَبَتْ فِيهِ زَكَاةُ الْفِطْرِ مِنْ بَعْدِ بَدْرٍ بِلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ. After 10 nights of Badr, Allah obligated the Zakatul Fitr, which we all distribute in the month of Ramadan before the Eid Salah. We all pay Zakatul Fitr, as you know. For every believer or household, every person we have in our household, we pay a specific amount. And then وَفِي زَكَاةِ الْمَالِ خُلْفٌ فَدْرِ وَمَاتِتِ ابْنَةُ النَّبِيِّ الْبَرِّ. Okay. So then also now is speaking about the obligation of zakatul mal, or what we normally call as zakah, right? There's two different forms of charity here. Zakatul fitr, which is due upon every believer for the commodities that they have. This is due upon everyone, male, female, child, adult. And then we have zakatul mal, which is based on whether a person has reached the nisab level based on the amount of wealth they have, so on and so forth. So one is general, the other one is specific. And then that line continued about the death of one of the daughters of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which comes in the next line, رُقَيَّةٌ قَبْلَ رُجُوعِ السَّفَرِ زَوْجَةُ عُثْمَانَ وَعُرْسُ الطُّهْرِ. That when they were coming back from the journey, i.e. when they were coming back from Medina, when they were coming back from Badr, returning to Medina, on their way back to Medina from Badr, Ruqayya radiallahu anha passed away, the first wife of Uthman radiallahu anhu, and hence why Uthman radiallahu anhu did not attend Badr. And then the author goes, فاطمة على علي القدر وأسلم العباس بعد الأسر. And so the marriage of Fatima to Ali radiallahu anhu, and also the acceptance of Islam for Abbas, the uncle of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was taken as a prisoner of war at Badr. Right. The author continues, وَقَيْنُقَاعُ غَزْوُهُمْ فِي الْإِثْرِ وَبَعْدُ ضَحَّى يَوْمَ عِيدِ النَّحْرِ. Okay. So, there were three tribes. There were three tribes in Medina at the time, as mentioned, Banu Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa, and Banu Qurayza. And they had entered into an agreement with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that they would identify him as as the leader, community leader, because they knew how powerful he was. They were in no position to not accept his authority. So they accepted Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as their community leader. However, they were waiting for an opportunity to break the treaty with him. So what happened was, just to keep it short, is that the Jews basically broke the treaty. They attacked a woman, a Muslim female, and they were ready to go up in arms against the Muslims. Remember what we said that initially, that it was always a state of war unless a peace treaty was agreed. So now that the Banu Qaynuqa, they had broken the treaty, what does that mean now? They're at war. And many people, many Orientalists will say, oh, Prophet Muhammad, as mentioned, he's a warmonger. He instigated the wars, he marched out towards them. If we take this principle of default being war unless there's a peace treaty, we can understand that no, he didn't instigate war. This is the outcome of breaking a treaty, isn't it? This is the outcome of breaking a treaty. Yeah, when you come into an agreement and someone's violated that, and they violated it purposefully, automatically that means that these people are at war. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he gathered an army and he held them hostage, or he besieged them within their towers. And they asked for mercy. But no, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he executed them. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he executed them, and he took the women and children were taken as slaves. Women and children taken as slaves. No, sorry. Okay. They came and sought mercy. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ exiled them. He exiled them from Medina. And so then we carry on. وغزوة السويق ثم قرقرة والغزو في الثالثة المشتحرة. Again, a mention of a few other expeditions that happened in the third year of Hijrah. And again, more في غطفان وبني سليم كلثوم ابنة الكريم. Again, the mention of more battles of Ghatafan and Banu Sulaym, and then the mention of the marriage of Kulthum to Uthman. زوج عثمان بها وخصة ثم تزوج النبي حفصة. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ initially, first he married his one daughter, Ruqayya, to Uthman. She passed away, and then married another daughter, Kulthum, to Uthman again. And at this time, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also married the daughter of Umar radiallahu anhu, who was Hafsa. And she was offered to Abu Bakr, she was offered to Uthman, but they were both refused. And then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ married her. وزينبا ثم غزا إلى الأحد في شهر شوال وحمراء الأسد. Okay, and he mentions that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also, in the next line, so he married Hafsa, then the next wife he married was Zainab bint Khuzaymah. He married two Zainab, Zainab bint Jahash and Zainab bint Khuzaymah. And then happened the Battle of Uhud in the month of Shawwal, and also happened another battle or expedition, Hamra al-Asad. Now again, Battle of Uhud. Battle of Uhud. Again, the context. Muslims, the Muslim army is about 700. And the army of the Quraysh are approximately, if I remember correctly, 3,000 or so. And we know the famous story that Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stationed a number of archers, approximately 50 archers, on the mountain, and they were commanded that they do not leave this position, even if they see the Muslims winning or if they're being slaughtered. That was their command, and they were placed there. And as we know the story, the Muslims were winning. The Battle of Uhud, the Muslims were winning, and they were on the verge of victory. And the companions that were the archers, the companions of the archers that were stationed on the mountain, they assumed that the battle had finished because the Quraysh were fleeing and the Muslims were looting and taking the war booty, the war spoils. So they had assumed that the battle had finished, and they descended. And Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was not Muslim then, noticed that there was an opportunity for him to take his fleet around the back of the Muslims and, in a sense, have them encircled. And then this is how we know he came in, he encircled them, and the Muslims, in a sense, had no way to exit now. There was confusion. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was attacked and he was hurt. Many companions protected him, and they retreated. Obviously, the story, again, I'm summarizing it due to time constraints and due to wanting to get through as much as we can. But again, a lesson that we draw is that if the companions, this is something for us to think about, if the companions who we accept them as our examples, if this incident occurred, I don't want to say they made a mistake, they were humans, they make mistakes. I don't want to say that they did anything incorrect, they didn't follow the commandments of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That's not anything we can say. But what we can generalize and say is that if this was the outcome of a misunderstanding or an assumption from the companions, what about ourselves? What about ourselves when we hear the words of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when we hear his commandments, when we hear the words of Allah? We stand in Taraweeh, we hear the Imam speaking, and we hear the Khutbah Jum'ah Bayan, we hear and we read and we listen to lectures, and Allah's commandments, the words of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they come and we are negligent, directly negligent. We directly refuse. What is to happen to us? What is to happen to our society? If such an incident happened in the companions, there was a misunderstanding. Not to say that Allah is punishing them, not to say that Allah is causing any harm. But it could be Allah is teaching us a lesson. Maybe the companions learned a lesson, but maybe Allah is teaching us a lesson from this. That if this can happen to the greatest people of this nation, then what about us? What will happen to us if we leave the teachings and the commandments of Allah and His Messenger? If there's anything, when we learn about the battles of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, if there's anything that we should learn about is these concepts of obedience to Allah, tawakkul, trust, rather than looking at them as victories and looking at them as examples of physical strength. That happens a lot, I mean, again, amongst young brothers, but we should draw these lessons which are directly applicable in our lives and, in a sense, general. Yeah. So when we learn about these incidents, specific conflicts that came to the Ummah at the time, remember we are in conflict in our time, in our context, in our households, in whatever situation it may be in, only Allah knows. However, we can learn the general lessons of tawakkul, trust, obedience to Allah, and how the companions did that to get out of the difficulties and trials that they faced. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time. Inshallah, we'll finish shortly. Then we said, okay, yep, this happened in the month of Shawwal. وَالْخَمْرُ حُرِّمَتْ يَقِينًا فَاسْمَعًا هذا وفيها ولد السبت الحسن. So these verses are speaking about the prohibition of khamr, of alcohol, and also the birth of his first grandson Hassan. The way the Quran, the way Allah prohibited khamr, it happened in stages. First demonstrating the harms it causes, and then that you shouldn't approach salah whilst in such a state, and finally confirming that it is outright, qat'i, completely, conclusively haram. So I don't know how well that line reflects the stages, but as far as we know, the author has put in this chronology, which happened just before or during the 4th year of Hijrah. And also the birth of his first grandson, Hassan, from his daughter Fatima and his son-in-law, as well as cousin Ali radiallahu anhuma. The author carries on, وَكَانَ فِي الرَّابِعَةِ الْغَزْوُ إِلَى بَنِي النَّضِيرِ فِي رَبِيعٍ الْأَوَّلَ. And so then, this is the incident with regards to and the second Jewish tribe, Banu Nadir. Banu Nadir. Banu Nadir, again, another Jewish tribe that plotted against Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They wanted to crush him under a rock, and that's when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he exiled them. I'll double check that if he exiled them or not. I'll have to double check. However, he exiled them, and they left behind their goods, and the Muslims inherited it. وبعد موت زينب المقدمة وبعده نكاح أم سلمة. And after that occurred the death of Zainab bint Khuzaymah. So Zainab passed away, the previous wife of Prophet Muhammad that we mentioned, and then he married Salama. وبنت جحش ثم بدر الموعد وبعدها الأحزاب فاسمع وعدد. And so then after he married Salama, he married Zainab bint Jahsh, and then happened al-Badr al-Maw'id, which was again the third battle of Badr, which wasn't another battle, but it was just again a meeting of an army, and nothing occurred. Again, the author's bringing a lot of this just for documentation. It's not as though it was a significant incident. And then he speaks about the battle of Ahzab, or as we say, Khandaq. So what happened was, as we previously mentioned, Banu Nadir, they were exiled and they went to Khaybar. They went to Khaybar, where they had their residency and they had their gardens. So they approached Quraysh and said, let's attack the Muslims. Let's attack the Muslims. We'll support you if you go for them again. And so they gathered and they marched towards Medina, and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ received news that an army is coming of confederates, of an alliance, an amalgamation of the Jews and of the Quraysh. And so he held a council of war, speaking with his companions, and then came the idea of whether they defend Medina from inside or outside. Then Salman al-Farisi, he came with the idea that let's dig trenches. Let's dig a trench, so that, because he had seen this in Persia, the Sassanid Empire would use this at the time of war so that the enemy are unable to enter into their fortresses. So they began digging, and they built a trench which was not able to be entered across, was not be able to be penetrated by the Quraysh. And the Quraysh camped for a number of days until Allah sent a powerful wind, a very strong sandstorm wind, which made them retreat, and in a sense the Muslims were victorious. Again, I'm summarizing very quickly just due to time. And so then, okay, then comes the next ثم بنو قريظة وفيهما خلف وفي ذات الرقاع علما. Again, another battle, ذات الرقاع, and also again the Banu Qurayza, the Banu Qurayza as well. So Banu Qurayza, they betrayed the Muslims during the Battle of Ahzab. Again, violation of the peace treaty, right? The violation of the peace treaty. And just something interesting, just to understand how the Jews, just how the Jews at the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were. So there was an incident, I believe the incident comes. I believe it comes. We'll discuss it. And then كيف الصلاة الخوف والقصر نمي وآية الحجاب والتيمم. And so then came the commandments of how to pray Salatul Khawf, Salah, how you pray Salah whilst in battle, and how Salah is shortened, and also the verses with regards to hijab and tayammum. قيل ورجمه اليهوديان قيل رجمه اليهوديين ومولد السبت الرضاء الحسين. Okay, so now this is the incident I was speaking about. What happens is there is a zina occurs between two Jews, and so they come. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he comes to them and he asks them, the Jews, what does the Torah say about the punishment for fornication? And so what they said is, they said, you bring a riding beast, a camel or a donkey, you seat the two fornicators back to front, with their backs to each other on the camel or the riding beast, and you parade them through the city. This was the punishment. So then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, can you bring your Torah? Bring your Torah. And he brings it, and he says, read. And with him is a converted Jew, Abdullah ibn Salam. And so he says to the Jews there, okay, you brought your Torah, read. What he does is, places his hand over the verses and starts reading. The verse that speaks about stoning, about rajam, he covers them, because that's what the punishment was. However, he covers it and just carries on reading whatever it says. And then Abdullah ibn Salam says, move your hand, what are you doing? He moves it, and the punishment says, rajam. This was the people that were there at the time. This is how the Jews were. This is what Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was dealing with. They had to be very careful, very smart. So that's an interesting story, how the verses of Allah are there, but they are violating them outright. Complete violation of Allah's commandments. And so then, speaks about the birth of Hussein, his second grandson. Okay. So now this line, وَكَانَ فِي الْخَامِسَةِ اسْمَعْ وَثِقْ الْإِفْكُ فِي غَزْوِ بَنِي الْمُصْطَلِقِ. Inshallah, we will stop. We've done, okay, alhamdulillah, we've come to we're on line 68. Okay, alhamdulillah. And I think I'll spend the next few minutes speaking about this, inshallah. We wanted to finish 75, we're on 68, alhamdulillah. I think that's good. So then, inshallah, next week we can finish it off. If not, then I'll ask the masjid, maybe ask one of the mushahid if we can have one more session maybe after Asr on a Monday, if possible, and just maybe finish it off, inshallah. So this is in relation to the slander of Aisha radiallahu anha. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was coming back from an expedition against Banu Mustaliq. One of his wives actually was from this tribe, Juwayriyah. So they're returning, and Aisha loses her necklace. She requires to relieve herself. The narration says she requires to relieve herself, and so the caravan of the believers that had come, they'd stop. She does what she requires to do, and she comes, and then she realizes that her necklace is missing, that her mom gave her, I believe, at the time of her wedding. And so then she goes looking for it. She goes looking, and thinking, okay, the caravan are still here, the caravan and the Muslims, Prophet ﷺ, etc., they're still here, they're waiting for me. She goes looking for it, maybe I left it, maybe I dropped it here. Then she comes back, and she finds that they're gone. And so she waits there, hoping that someone will realize that she's missing. They used to carry them in Bangla, what do you call it? Falki, I think, in Bangla. It's howdaj. It's a little room or a little carrying falki, falki in Bangla. I believe it's howdaj in Arabic. Is it, Sheikh? Howdaj, yeah, howdaj. It's a little box for females, women to sit, and there's sticks on it, and each person holds it and carries it. Okay? In Bangladesh, this is how they would take the bride to the groom's house. For the young brothers that don't know, yeah. So they used to use that. That's how the wives of Prophet Muhammad used to be carried. And the companion that lifted it up, they didn't realize that it felt light. She thought they would realize that, oh, okay, the howdaj is light. It's light. Is she in there? She might not be. But they didn't realize. And so she's waiting and she falls asleep. She's waiting, she falls asleep. Until another companion that had fallen behind came. I believe his name was Safwan ibn Mu'attal, I believe. I'll double check the name. He was Safwan ibn Mu'attal. He comes and finds that, oh, this is the wife of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so then he escorts her back to Medina. He safely takes her back to Medina. And then the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, comes with these false accusations of this, that, of haram, of astaghfirullah, zina, all of these accusations come flying out about Aisha radiallahu anha and this companion. And it spreads like wildfire around the Muslims in Medina. And Prophet Muhammad becomes very upset. Aisha falls ill. And she realizes that in her illness, Prophet Muhammad has become quite reserved from her. And she requests to go to her parents' house. And remember, she's been ill and she doesn't know that these rumors and lies about her are being spread around the entire community of Medina. The wife of Prophet Muhammad astaghfirullah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. People coming up with such lies. And so then she goes to her parents' house and then she realizes to what extent these lies and rumors have spread. And she becomes very upset. She becomes very upset. And then, subhanAllah, to cut it short, Allah sends verses in her defense. Allah sends verses to prove her innocence. And at the same time, demonstrate the consequences of those that come with such allegations. And these rulings are still are part of the Quran, and they apply now in Sharia courts. And if this were to be applied, these would be applied in Sharia. This is part of the Sharia now. That if someone accuses a chaste lady of zina, this person is whipped 80 times, and their testimony is withdrawn from them for the rest of their lives. They are no longer counted as someone that is trustworthy. That they cannot give testimony in court. Ultimately, this person is a liar, a lifetime liar. Subhanallah. Now, Aisha radiallahu anha, and I'll finish on this, she brought many, verses came down for her. Due to some of her instances and situations, many blessings came to this ummah. This is again demonstrates, this is another blessing. Through this situation, a blessing came to this ummah. That if someone, again, this links to the concept of people saying that Islam is a barbaric religion. And through these verses that were revealed for Aisha, demonstrates that they definitely weren't. Because you need 4 witnesses to prove the action of zina. You need 4 witnesses. If you do not have 4 witnesses and a person comes with this claim and this claim is false, such a person loses their testimony. The truthfulness is, they are rid for their lifetime. So now, if we look at in reverse, if someone comes with these, a potential witness to zina, firstly, getting 4 is very difficult. Do you see how Allah is protecting the chastity of the believers? Even if someone committed zina, you need 4 witnesses to prove it. You need 4. It's quite difficult, right? And secondly, if there is any doubt or if there is any deficiencies and the stories of those that are giving witness do not add up, because they'll be asked specific questions. What is zina? How does it happen? There's a number of questions. If their responses do not add up, the entire case is dropped. The entire case of zina is dropped. Oh, your stories don't match up. Sorry, zina didn't occur. So when anyone ever says Islam is barbaric, it whips, it kills, it slits hands, no. There's a process. There's a way of determining and coming. This is the final call of judgment. Prior to that, fact checking. The judge will ask questions. The judge will get testimony. It's so beautiful. And this is something as believers, these intricacies are important that we understand, because for us living in the West, this is one way that Islam is being, is being attacked. It being barbaric, Prophet Muhammad being a warlord, him marrying a girl, the concept of slavery. Again, this is something that has come very recently. If we can understand these concepts, it will really empower us to engage with non-Muslims in the social settings that we work in, work, school, university, whatever it may be. So this is how this incident, do you see, subhanAllah, how from an abstract incident in the Sunnah, in the seerah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it adds value to our deen. Of course, verses for Aisha, and they added more rulings, but it adds, do you see the value that it adds to our religion? That when people come with these claims, your religion is barbaric. If someone does something, you slit their hand. No, it's not that easy. There's levels, there's ways. If there's any doubt or any inaccuracies and mismatch in stories, the entire case is dropped. It's not as though they'll call a second hearing, third hearing. No, the entire case is dropped. Yeah? Okay, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we'll end there. I know it's dragged on a little bit. Jazakumullah khairah, brothers. And inshallah, with your du'as, I hope that we can all, inshallah, finish the entire seerah. We have about nearly just a little bit over 100 lines, and the last few lines are just ending and du'as from the author. Inshallah, I hope we are able to finish next week. Jazakumullah khairah for your attendance. Any mistakes which I mentioned are from myself alone, from shaitan, and anything good and everything correct that I've said is from the words of Allah and His Messenger alone. Jazakumullah khairah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu fikum.
journey